welcome back to another episode of the Women's Health Community Podcast. If I sound like a man right now, it's because I'm a little bit sick. I've been struggling to breathe for the last 48 hours, but apparently I don't sound as bad as I feel, so that's a positive. But I have another guest. If you're at our live event, you will know very well who this is and exactly why she's on the podcast. So, Lauren, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been
I
very
don't know
excited.
if you've listened to any of the episodes, but we start the podcast with 3 questions, and then the 4th question is different for every single guest.
Okay.
So, what is
Pressure's
one
on.
non-negotiable in your day every single day?
My new non-negotiable recently, and it has been giving me life, is beach walks. So I want to get my steppies in, like a lot of the girlies who are probably listening want their steppies, but I'm very big on environment. So I'm like, I need to feel inspired by my environment, not just walking like the same streets and neighborhood, you know. So
Through
that's
the
probably
hood.
the current one at the moment. Yeah.
That's what you get for living near the beach, unlike me.
Bayside girly.
What was your childhood dream job? What did you want to be when you were growing up?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So firstly, when I was like really young, I wanted to be a teacher, but the main one was I wanted to be a singer and a performer.
Can you
Don't
sing?
ask me to fucking sing because
Can you
it's not
sing
gonna happen. Yeah, but like not well enough to like
Be as a professional.
be a singer, but that was just the vibe.
Yeah.
And then that changed actually quickly. I wanted to be a magistrate at one stage, like a judge.
Is that the one that like they wear the full wig?
Well, I wouldn't have wanted to rock the wig, but you know, if that was part of the job description, I wouldn't have done it. But yeah, that was a thing for a bit as well. Bizarre.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would not have pictured that.
I know. Well, thank God I didn't go down that route.
Lucky we wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, that's it.
What is your death row meal?
My death row meal. Okay. Well, it would always be like just the fattest pasta and pizza, like just carbs. And then I reckon as well, like I always think about like say Macca's, KFC, Hungry Jack's, but the things that I would get from each of them.
Okay.
Like I find that like the burgers are better at Hungry Jack's.
Yeah.
So I might get like a Hungry Jack's burger. The chips are better at like KFC.
KFC, yeah.
So if I'm going out, like I'm going to.
So do you act so off topic, but last night we're at dinner with me, my husband, my sister and her partner, and we had maybe a 45-minute conversation about would you have your death row meal as something super like extravagant and luxurious, or would you just eat the prison food to make you less sad that it is your last day on this earth?
No, if you're going to go out, you need to go
So that
hard.
was my answer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My husband and I had maybe a 20-minute full-blown argument about this because he was like, no, I wouldn't want to be more sad than I already am. And I'm like, no, give me everything that I want.
Yeah. Well, I've worked in a prison before and I've tried prison food and it's
Disgusting.
pretty, like it's okay, but like
It's not
if
what
you have
want
the
on your
choice,
last
pick
day.
something. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, and then final question is different for every single guest. As someone, I know you have traveled quite a lot. If you could live and work and build your life with your fiance in any other country in the world, where would you live?
That is such a good question. Prior to COVID, we were actually thinking about doing a year in Europe somewhere, like going to Amsterdam or maybe like Edinburgh or somewhere random because we did travel to Europe. Where would it be now? I really want to go to America. I haven't been. I know
You've never
that's
been
like
to
your
America?
soul home. No, I've never been, and I'm really pissed off about it. I feel like that would be really
That,
cool.
honestly, we say all the time, if it wasn't so hard to get like rights to live there or visas to live there or what, even for a year, like you can do 3 months easily, but to do a year, it's quite difficult. I'm like, if it was easy as an application and approval, Australia, see you later. Texas, here we come.
Yeah, Texas would be cool. I've got a friend in Texas at the moment. The thing that I find hard is like, because my partner really wants to live overseas, but the idea of packing up everything.
Oh, no, see, I'm
and
all for
going.
it. Give me 2 suitcases. The hardest part would be my dog.
Of
Like,
course.
would I bring her with me or would I leave her in Australia knowing I'm coming back?
The quarantine's savage.
I couldn't do that to her. She's a freaking anxious baby. Like,
Baby.
anyway, little rant over. Great question. I really like that question. I might
love
use that
that.
for everyone else that
It's not
I know
something
that
thought.
travels. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those who weren't at the event, I know you went into a little bit of detail about your past with studying and your qualifications, and then obviously you mentioned previously that you did work in a prison. So just explain a little bit about what your technical qualification is, because I think that's a really good distinction before we get into any of the further into this episode, and then a little bit about work and why you started to become more of a holistic coach than straight by the book.
Yeah. So my background is in criminal justice and social work. So that is what I studied when I went to uni. When I was working in the Department of Justice, which was like the job that I got outside of the criminal justice degree, there was a lot of training to do with, you know, counselling and how to hold space and, you know, therapeutic behaviour change and all of those sort of things. So I then went on to do counselling because it was kind of a no-brainer for me, especially when I was transitioning out and wanting to start my own business, and also a qualified coach as well, life coach, yeah.
Yeah, and then what was it? Was it like more so the natural progression to go into the prison system?
Do you mean like studying criminal justice?
Yeah, was it like that just where kind of people went, or was there something that more drove you to working within that?
Look, I have always had such a fascination in why people are the way they are, why they do what they do.
Yep.
And I remember when I was having to choose what I wanted to do for uni, I was like, what is the most extreme version of behavior?
Yeah.
Crime, like criminal offending. Like that's just, you know, and for me, it was almost like a morbid curiosity and fascination. But the work that I was doing was actually working with the perpetrators. So that was really interesting too, because it was obviously there's that victim empathy you have, but then when you're working with the perpetrators, it's this whole other kettle of fish where you're really actually working out like, why are you here right now? Why are you doing what you're doing? And that was really interesting.
The thought patterns that you probably learnt about people throughout that, you're like, obviously you're not a criminal. You don't know how to go, or you probably know how people have like done these crazy things.
How to get away with murder or something.
Yeah, like you're probably the perfect person to ask, but it's also like the thought patterns of someone like that would be so extreme that it would be like, wow, it would have definitely tickled something in the brain.
Yeah, it definitely tickled my brain in a lot of ways, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It varied. Like there was some people I work with, I was always working with high risk offenders. So some, it was really hectic. Like there was sex offending, there was a lot of like really heavy stuff. Then there was other stuff that was like drink driving and, you know, or offenses like that. Like I remember when I was working in the prison, I assessed someone and I'm like, why are you here? And they're like, I just didn't pay my fucking toll fines for like 10 years and here I am. So it was, there was, I don't know. We'll get into all that.
That's a sign that I need to go and pay my toll bill or make sure that that's up to date. I would not survive in prison. Let's put that out there first.
If you're not paying your tolls, like start paying your fines because you never know.
Lauren will be catching up with us in the high risk jail. Oh my God.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But anyway, it varied.
Yeah. And how long were you in that system for?
I worked there for probably about 5 years. So I was really fortunate. Like things moved very fast after I graduated. So while I was still studying, I got a job as a justice officer, which was kind of like front desk at one of the correctional centres. And I was interacting with a lot of offenders, but not like technically working with them one-on-one. And things just moved really, really fast. So that kind of progressed to case management and I was working in like community correction centres. So if people are sentenced not into prison, but they're doing kind of their orders outside in the community, that's what I was managing. And that's where there's parolees and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was very fast tracked.
Very crazy. I feel like it's a whole other world that I'm like so delusional to.
It is.
And I know in the Q&A at our live event, you mentioned that you one day were in love with it and then over time quickly found out that it just wasn't the right industry for you or you kind of fell out of love with or had that passion. What was the kind of, was there like a trigger moment or was it a trigger like, or was it just kind of over time the passion for that specific work was no longer there and that's what led you more into like the holistic side of things?
Yeah, there were so many different things. Like, I mean, the biggest thing that I realized, and in hindsight, you know, I look back and I over-identified with this job. Like, you know, when you do something and you're like, this is my career, like I'm so passionate about it and it becomes your world and there was no balance in other areas. And because it was such a heavy place to work and there was so much vicarious trauma and a lot of stuff, like I was working with people with mental health issues, drug and alcohol abuse, homelessness, complex trauma, all those sort of things. So it's heavy, right? And if you're not looking after yourself,
or have no outlet, really.
Have no outlet. And that's what was kind of happening. There was so many different things. I think it just got to a stage where I'm a big believer in like the mind-body connection, right? And I realized this working in the prison. I got to a stage where I was like, my mindset and these narratives are like, you chose this path, this is your path, this is what you wanted to do, this is who you told yourself you should be. but then my body's telling me something else. I'm having panic attacks. I'm not sleeping. I am getting sick more often. So it was really interesting to kind of see how I was working against myself and really kind of pushing to this path that just wasn't aligned anymore. And we outgrow things, right? But I think there's a lot of grieving that comes with that, especially when you're like, this was meant to be my path, my forever thing.
And I think as well, I'm obviously not putting words or putting scenarios into your world, but also I think as well, as someone who has parents who are quite traditionalist, like what you study at uni is exactly what you need to be. Like I studied photography at uni. I haven't picked up a camera since the day I graduated my course.
Yeah.
And I was careerless. I wasn't jobless. I was careerless for 2.5 years before I started studying again. So I think you also then have that internal dialogue within yourself where you're like, no, this is what I studied. This is actually what I need to be doing. And this is where I need to be investing my time. But you're like, your body is literally physically telling you like,
this ain't it. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's so interesting you said that because I was the first person in my family to graduate uni, right?
Yeah.
So there was a massive thing on like, there was a lot of pride that came with that. And everyone loved being like, oh my God, my parents were like, guess where my daughter works? Like, you know, all of the stories, like it was super fascinating until it wasn't, until I didn't want to talk about it. I was so burnt out. It was, so that was a huge thing as well. And I think it was always like, what are other people going to think? And when I wanted to start my own business and that thought started to drop in, there was so much shame around that because I was like, who am I to leave this like full-time secure government role in the middle of a global pandemic, mind you? Like it just made no sense.
Yeah. And then going into a little bit about your business now, obviously it's completely different. You're working largely, I would just say only with women?
A bit of men.
Okay, so it's not you're not like a women's
predominantly.
only.
Predominantly women.
Yeah, and then so you're coming from these extreme cases of like the most high risk left of field things to a holistic women targeted industry.
Yeah.
What would you say like the biggest differences within yourself that you've found? Do you feel like you're obviously less anxious now, you're more aligned, you're feeling better, what's the differences for you?
That's a great question. Well, firstly, like having your own business is a different sort of stress, as you would know.
Oh, I actually got sent a meme and it's like 2 photos of this guy and it's like, I'm going to own my own business. And he's like really happy, really excited. And then there's like reality of owning your own business. And it's this same guy like bawling his eyes out. I'm like, can relate.
Yeah. So obviously there's that kind of stress that's come with it, but I'm a completely different person. Like I was reflecting on it the other day and I was thinking about how, like I've always known that I've wanted to help people and connect with people and support them. But when I was at the department and I was working in the criminal justice field, I remember just being like, there was no humanness. I think that was the biggest thing, right? There was policy, there was process, there was procedure, which is obviously you needed. But there was no like just vulnerability, no deeper connection. There was this mistrust between like, it was like I was expected to be this authority figure, which never sat right with me because I'm like, this person's here
because
for
they
a
need
reason.
help,
And like, I don't care what it is they've done. Like you want to connect with that person, human to human. So obviously flash forward now, the biggest difference is, you know, the work I was doing before, they were mandated by the courts to be there. So a lot of them didn't actually want the fucking help.
Yeah.
The people I'm working with now, they're actively seeking me out and saying, I am willing, let's go. And that's really beautiful. And, you know.
And as well, just the level of actual trust that they have in you in order to actually allow them and guide them to change would be so different.
Oh, massively.
I hear this a lot, especially with people who come out of uni. I mean, Kate even talks about it with like when she's going into her first job, people had to be there and they don't actually want to be doing the thing that you're telling them to do. Whereas if people voluntarily come to you, it's like, well, you actually have impact in their lives.
Yeah. And there's that accountability there because, I mean, it's coming from them. They're at a stage where they're at a crossroads a lot of the time or they're going through transition or change or burnout, anxiety, whatever it is that they're facing. But the biggest thing for me is like the moment you reach out, that's sometimes the hardest part, being like, actually, I think it's time to feel different, to think different, to be better. And there's so much power in that.
Yeah. I think, reaching out, definitely. I see it all the time, every day. So kind of a little pivot. What are some of the things now? Obviously, previously you mentioned you were dealing with drug and alcohol, homelessness, all of these crazy things. What are some of the biggest things that now that you are working with your clients? Obviously, you don't need to give specifics and things like that, but what are the main things that you kind of help women with?
So in a nutshell, like the main things would be mental clarity, mindful living, emotional awareness and regulation, burnout prevention and recovery, which is a huge one. Anxiety management, relationships and attachment is a really big one as well.
Okay.
I'm very big on, I do couples counseling as well, which is so much fun. But that's really interesting too, because when we work out our attachment style, like if we've got an anxious attachment, this isn't just in our relationships, it leaks into every single area, our habits, you know, our business, everything. So again, it's that real people who are dealing with inner conflict, inner turmoil. We all have been there. We all go through periods of change, which can feel really uncomfortable. And often they're reaching out when they're at a point where they're like, I need that support in my corner.
Yeah. It's crazy. I would love to just be a fly on the wall in your office some days.
Yeah.
I feel like some of the conversations, it would just be like, I feel like as well, even just having this conversation, it makes people feel less alone.
That's the biggest thing.
And I think it's something with this community, with this podcast, with me being so vulnerable on my social media about things like binge eating, things like my mental health, things like all of this stuff. It's like, why am I hiding it? Why does it need to be a secret? Why do I need to be alone in this? And I think even with my clients, like we have a community, a group chat, and I'm like, yes, your journey is yours, but you don't need to be alone in the process. And I think it's such a powerful thing for people to break down those barriers of, yes, my mental health is my issue. However, it's not a scandal. It's not anything that needs to be hidden. And I think just really making people feel less alone is something that there's so much power in. And I think that there's so much progress for other people that can come just from having conversations like this, or just from even, like you said, starting that first conversation. Because I'm sure the first thing you would say, and it's definitely the first thing I say when people come to me, you're not the only person that I've had this conversation with.
Yes, and normalising these things is huge. I know you came to the that event, Little Women's Circle we did, and I shared one of my favourite quotes, which is "Shame dies when stories are told."
I think I literally posted. I literally messaged. I was like, "Hey, what was that quote again? I need to post that."
Yeah, so it's shame dies when stories are told in safe places or safe spaces, and it's so true. Like I remember I used to have this mentality when I would work with clients where I'm like, I think naturally, even as coaches, it's like we feel sometimes we need to problem solve, or we need to make this the most impactful session ever. And realistically, someone just wants to feel heard and seen and understood, and really busting through that shame and being like, this is firstly amazing that you're here because you've got this self-awareness and you want to feel better, but you're not the only one. And that's the thing with mental health. There's so much shame attached to it. And when we feel alone, we isolate more. We forget that we can lean on community, which is huge.
And I think as well, it's like, even if you are someone that, like, definitely myself, like I'm definitely okay to talk about it now, but what was the final year of COVID, 2022?
We came out of it end of 21, didn't we? Because I feel like I don't know. Honestly, my concept of time with that is so skewed. But I think end of 21 into 22
Yeah,
maybe.
so 2022, I definitely, I think it was, before I had moved. So 2022, I had been diagnosed with clinical anxiety. 2023, the same year I got married, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. And I think at the time I was like, oh my God, there's something so wrong with me. But then I was like, you know what? Like, I'm someone who's always been really big on sharing, who talks about my problems. I'm not someone who hides it. As soon as I started talking about it, and I know it's an extreme situation to talk about it on social media, but it's my outlet. It's always been my outlet.
Too. That's you.
And it's never for like branding or never for business. It's always just been my outlet. And I think once I started talking about it and having people be like, oh, I feel like this as well. I tried this, or I had the same thing. And I'm like, it literally just made me feel so normal.
Yes.
And I think it was such a big part in my recovery to be like, oh, like there's actually nothing wrong with me.
Yes.
I'm just going through something. And I think it was such a nice normalization and a nice, like, just blank canvas to be like, okay, like, this is what's happened. This is what the diagnosis is. I'm not that.
100%. And separating yourself from that. Like, I'm very big. I do not like to over-identify with diagnoses or anything like that.
So definitely I was someone who did initially. Yes. So the first ever time in 2022, I was like, oh my God, like, it was so taboo in my whole world. Like, I was... Obviously, everyone was anxious during COVID. Everyone had some form of something during COVID. It was such an unknown time. I became this little, like, hermit, couldn't cook, couldn't function. My mum was like, something is not okay. And it wasn't until like I had removed myself and had moved and done all these things and just kept living that I was like, oh, like I'm actually fine.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to be that. I don't need to marry myself to that.
100%. COVID was such an interesting time, and I found that like even today there's clients that are still talking about the effects of like even like becoming socially anxious. Like that's so common. And you think about like it takes how long to build a habit? Like 30 days or something. We were locked down in Melbourne for like 100 and something days.
I swear it was 3 years. No, 2 years.
It felt like an eternity. And you think about like I know that I've been having to reverse really shitty habits from that time of just falling out of, exercise or, eating shit or whatever it is. People are still kind of reversing the effects of that, I feel. But what I noticed was happening is we got out of it and we weren't locked down anymore. But there was this mentality of, all right, let's just get on with it and make up for lost time. But it's like we went from like slowing down and actually being forced to face ourselves and not have as many distractions to just being like full guns blazing. Yeah. And I think that's been a really interesting thing too, because there are still those effects that we've got, And
I actually, for the first time in fucking who knows how long, was watching the news and they were talking about like they're getting rid of work from home for corporate jobs now. And it's going back to full time, like in the office 5 days a week. Yeah, and there was so many like arguments about it. I'm like, it's crazy because obviously I started my business in 2020. So my whole world has been work from home.
Same.
And I'm like, oh my God, like people have to like, I couldn't do that. Like my anxiety could not handle getting on a train every morning, going into the city, going into a building, dealing with the noise. I'm like, I go to a shopping centre on a Thursday night after 6 p.m. and I'm like, this is too much for me. Get me out of here. Like, I'm like, it is so insane. Like you said, people are still dealing with the onsets of that. And it's just, it's crazy.
But the work-life balance, right? Like I think as absolutely wild and insane as that time was, when there was that balance between, going a couple of days in the office but then working from home, a lot of people realized, oh, well, this can be done. Like this was never an option before. Like I think about when I used to have to travel into the city for a meeting that might have been an hour and I'm like, there's a thing called fucking Zoom, right? Like I can actually just be in the comfort of my home and not commute. So work-life balance is a really big thing, or being able to just do a little bit of life admin stuff around the house to help our mental load, to ease our mental load.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit ridiculous if they're wanting to.
And as well, like I'm not someone who functions great at 8 a.m. in the morning.
No. I don't think we're meant to, like, I know for me, my brain starts to kick in later in the day. Like,
I'm like a 10:30 to 2.
Yeah.
Like I worked at a cafe prior to this. I did 2.5 hours of work. If I was to do that at home from 8 a.m., it would take me until 3 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was really interesting when I left the 9-to-5 world and started my business. For so long, I was like telling myself from 9 till 5, I need to sit down and do work. And sometimes you'd sit there and be like, none of this is productive. This is ridiculous. And I realized like my cycles are different. My brain works differently. And sometimes we only have like 3 or 4 productive hours in the day, and the rest it's like.
It's definitely something I felt guilty with because obviously like my sisters work a 9 to 5. My parents have always worked 9 to 5. And then you get me like out at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning or out at what time is it? 1 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, like doing something fun that's technically work. Yeah. But there was just always, it took me 5 years of running my business to be okay with it. But it's also like such an interesting concept that I think there's somewhere actually in Northern Europe. The first place that comes to mind is Switzerland. I don't actually know if it is.
Probably. They're like elite.
They're like, and I'm pretty sure it's like, it's a 4-day work week. And then the work hours, you can either pick between like 3 blocks. So you could do like a 6 a.m. to 1. I think it was like a 9 to 4 or like a 11 to 7 or something like that. But it was only 4 days a week. And then the government came out saying like, we want to have our people, work to live. What's the one where it's like you're living more than you're working?
Yeah, of course. Well, we don't want to just feel like we're, is it
living to work?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I know what you mean though.
Yeah, like
I always say make work for you, right? It's so easy to feel like,
so
it's
they
the other way around.
literally reduced their work week from 5 days to 4 and made it shorter, slightly longer days, but obviously you're working less hours. And I was like, I think that is so smart.
if it is, it's either Switzerland or Sweden or something.
One of them, yeah.
They're far beyond, like they're living in the future in a lot of ways. I'm pretty sure their crime rates are like
Low.
practically non-existent. Like there's a lot that they're doing.
Maybe I need.
really
Maybe that's where I would live.
Maybe that's where we'll
That's
go.
where I would put down as my
true.
living place. Or Japan.
Oh, Japan is
But
so
Japan are
sick.
workaholics. Like,
Different culture. I think to visit there is one
Beautiful.
thing, but like, yeah, the culture and, you know, when you were there, did you see people like just asleep in cafes, like people in suits, like asleep on the trains and cafes? Apparently that's a sign of like respect because you're a hard worker, right?
so we landed in Japan having done absolutely no research into the country, into the culture, into where we were staying. So for those who don't know, that was where I did my honeymoon. We were there for 14 days in the same spot. So first thing we got there, didn't realize we were staying right in the center of the party area.
Were you in Tokyo?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hectic. Tokyo.
So
yeah.
we were right in the center of everything, and it literally got to the point where we were so culturally shocked. I was like to my husband, like, we need to go back to our hotel and we need to watch some YouTube videos because we had no idea what was going on. So we worked out that we're in the party area. That nightlife there starts at like midnight.
Yes.
Because their work culture is seen as disrespectful if you're the first person to leave. You're not a hard worker. So it even got to the point there where their government had to start turning off power in the buildings at 10 p.m. at night because people would work and would stay there for 5 days on end to be seen as a hard worker.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's insane. And
there'd be a lot of shame if you didn't, you know, work hard. Like that's so ingrained in the culture. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like even down to like where they parked, like being the first one there, if you parked close, you were seen as like a disrespectful worker. So you'd park further away and walk.
That.
It's
They're
so
so
insane.
thoughtful though. Like there was
Such beautiful people.
Oh, I remember just when I went there, it was not that long ago in like November or December. There was so much about just, and little things, like they're so thoughtful. They're just so ahead of the game in so many ways. But, and then I remember having a culture shock coming back here because like they're very quiet there. Like it's very respectful on the trains. You don't like talk loudly on the phone, all that.
Nothing.
And I remember the day I came back, I was like parking at Coles and there was this guy like abusing this guy, like dropping the seat. And I was just like, man, they would be
We're home.
shocked.
We're
Like,
home.
yeah.
No, definitely. It's a whole other world. They're beautiful though, but just they work to live. I keep going back to this. I don't even know the quote. I need to stop saying
like work-life balance is
it's non-existent.
Yeah.
But then they party, they get absolutely blind drunk, they're passed out on the road, and then they're back at work the next day, probably with a hangover, but doing it all again.
Could never be me.
Could never be me, but I absolutely love that for them, and I want to go back tomorrow.
Oh my God. Every single person I know that went was like, you will freaking love it and you will want to go back. And that's like the only, I love Europe, but like it's such a trek to get there. I'm like,
Japan is the perfect amount of travel time.
Incredible.
That's not insane. My husband went there. So this is such a segue of a conversation. He had never eaten sushi before, had never eaten at a Japanese restaurant before, and that was where we went on our honeymoon.
Well, he's a basic eater, isn't he?
Oh,
Because
he's
we've
like
been
a
out to dinner before. He's a very basic
He's like
eater.
a chicken schnitzel and like plain rice kind of guy.
Yeah.
So he went to we went to Japan for our honeymoon, and everyone's like, "What's he gonna eat? What's he gonna eat?" I'm like, he'll try things. Like he was fine in the end of the day, but he's even asking to go back because he loved the culture and the place. And we would walk around all day with absolutely no plans, and you're never bored, and you're never unsafe, and you're never like. It was just an insane place, honestly.
The food and the fashion for me, like the fashion, the streetwear.
The fashion,
like,
I've never felt so lame in my life. I know that I'm not a stylish person and that I struggle with my outfit choices outside of activewear, but I've never felt so lame in my life than I did.
Stylish.
Oh, they're incredible. And the designer stuff in all the stores, I was convinced that it was all fake, but it's all real. I was like,
Oh, it's insane. Like anyone listening who hasn't been, get a ticket.
Get a ticket.
ASAP.
Well, that was a 9-minute ramble about Japan.
You might need to put in the little thing, like if you don't want to hear about Japan, skip to this
forward.
time. Yeah.
Okay, so something that personally for me has really stuck out about your talk at the live event was the whole calms thing. So for those who don't know, explain what that is and in situations, when would you use that? What is like is it if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, like what is it and when would you use it?
Yeah, this one really landed for a lot of people. That was
A
so
lot
much
of
fun.
people.
And people were like referring back to it throughout the day, the calms method, which was so cool. So the calms method is something that I put together to share with my clients, and it's essentially what we can do in times where we notice we're feeling stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed. So on the day, I spoke about the window of tolerance. So it's kind of like understanding when we're inside of our window of tolerance, this is when we are relatively relaxed. We can take in new information. We can have difficult conversations. Like, we have the ability to cope. But as life happens and, you know, things happen, we can get outside of our window of tolerance and we can become either reactive or avoidant or fight or flight, right? And it was a visual representation of that. So essentially what I was talking about is whether you're a business owner, whether you're wanting to work on, you know, better communication in your relationship, whether you want to have better habits, whatever it is, what I notice majority of my clients trying to do is they're trying to attract, create, thrive the life that they want and whatever they want from a dysregulated state. They're either super anxious and super reactive or massively avoidant, and they're wondering why things aren't happening, why it's not feeling easy. So the calms method is what we can do to drop into when we notice that we are outside of our window of tolerance. Because usually when we're outside of our window of tolerance, that's when we have those little cheeky dopamine hits of, like, you know, scrolling on TikTok for fucking 2 hours or whatever it is. So the calms method is essentially, C is change your environment. So if you think about when you were feeling dysregulated, how easy is it to just like sit on your bed and just stay there? Like, there's a lot of energy coursing through your body. Just move, go to a different room, go outside, change your environment. C. A is activate intentional breath. So when we are stressed or anxious, we often hold our breath or we're not breathing properly. So it's such a beautiful just nervous system reset if we just take some time to do some intentional breath. So we've got change your environment. A is activate intentional breath. Do you remember what it is actually?
No.
Remember?
No.
Because I kept testing everyone. L is listen and notice your senses. So dropping into your 5 senses. This is all like scientifically evidence-based, proven things that are going to help us really drop out of our head and back into our body. M is move your body. So sure, we might go to the gym. We might, you know, do some high intensity stuff. But when I talk about moving your body, I use the analogy of, like, for dog owners, you know, when they get like a bit of a fright or something and they shake, we need to do that. We need to actually shake off some of this energy. Emotions are just energy in motion, right? So if we let it stagnate and sit there for too long, that cycle of dysregulation is going to continue. So move your body, do something, shake your ass to a playlist on Spotify, whatever you need to do to really kind of shake that off. And S, which a lot of people don't do, is self-regulation, self-validation. So really being able to remind yourself that you are safe, this feeling is only temporary, and, you know, your feelings are valid. So that's the calms method in a nutshell.
I love it. And I love that as well. So many, especially obviously with the visual representation, so many girls were like, I've never seen 50 women in my life so laser focused on something that someone was talking about, but it made so much sense. And I think, like we mentioned previously, coming out of some really tough years with lockdown and COVID, and obviously a lot more people are becoming a lot more accepting and understanding of mental health and anxiety and panic attacks and all of these things. It's conversations that I have daily with my clients, and I'm sure obviously that is your job. You obviously have that quite more frequently. And I think to have a tool that is free, that is so practical and so beneficial, it makes sense to do it.
Absolutely.
I know I'm someone that when I'm anxious, when something pisses me off, when something is just so overwhelming, and I'm like, I used to be very reactive and I would rah, 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 rah. I was that person. I was that chihuahua going nuts. That was me. And I think just to have a tool so simple where it's just like, change your environment, take a breath, go move your body, go do like these simple things, it is so beneficial.
It's just circuit breaking how you're feeling, because a lot of the time we do stay stuck there and then we wonder why everything feels harder, right? So it's really just giving yourself permission to drop into that. And you're right, it's free, it's easy. And I guess with that talk that I did, I was really wanting to focus on people leaving with practical, tangible tools that they can actually take and remember, because it's one thing to get up and talk about mental health. It's another for someone to leave and be like, I've actually got some tools that I want to try. The next time I notice that I'm feeling avoidant or anxious or whatever, I'm going to drop into that and see how I go.
And even just like coming back to not overcomplicating it.
Yes, which a lot of people do. And I find like a lot of clients that come to me and they've gone through periods of burnout, stagnancy, survival mode, whatever it is, right? When we're trying to get out of that and feel better and do better, and you might see this with your clients too, with even just like getting back into the gym. So many people overcomplicate it and overwhelm themselves because they try and overcompensate. They're like, okay, so
It's 0 to 100
it's 0
in
to
day
100.
one, in hour one.
And you're setting yourself up to fail, right? So it's like, just keep it really fucking simple. Sometimes it's as simple as like, are you having enough water? Are you speaking kindly to yourself?
Are you
going
getting
to
natural light?
100%.
Simple things, yeah.
Yeah. So if you are noticing that you're going through a period like that, like really just think, what are the most bare minimum, basic, non-negotiables? And it could be the CAMS method.
Could be.
Yeah.
But no, I've definitely loved that. And I think as well, like we said, like it's, oh my God, I just blanked on the word, uncomplicating it. Yeah, simplifying it.
It's just unfucking it, right?
Yeah, literally. It's like we mentioned, we're normalized. So I think a really beautiful trend that social media is going through right now. It's a normalization of mental health for men and women. And I'm a big advocate for that. I always will be. And I always will continue to do work within that. However I can, however I see beneficial for my followers, for myself, for my family and all of this. But I think, like we said, we're unfucking it. We're making it not this big complicated thing where if you want to get better, you need to pay me $30,000 to get better.
Ridiculous, yeah.
And it's just, realistically, not everyone will at some point in life be able to afford that.
I think as well, like I've noticed that there's definitely this trend on social media of like de-influencing, which is a really interesting one.
Yeah.
And
it was actually my most viral post that I posted last year was my 2024 Wrapped de-influencing edition.
Yes, I love it.
And so many people then went on to do the same thing. And I was like, it is so true though. Like,
yeah. And I think as well, like if you're someone that's on social media consuming or you're someone that's creating, either way, the biggest thing that I think we need to start to do is drop into the vulnerability and storytelling as well. Like I think that's, things have felt so different in my business, my connection with my clients, the impact I've been able to make the moment I started to share more about my story, because it's so easy when you follow someone who's got, you know, a great body with great habits or whatever it is that you're looking for. It's like you think that they've just clocked it and they're clocking life and they're perfect at it. It's like everyone has got their struggles. Everyone's got their story. And when you start to share it, people are like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
It's definitely something with my girls that I've noticed. So I've had a lot of my clients now. I know my longest client currently, I think we just clocked over 4 years.
Wow.
And I've only been running for 5. So she came to me very, very quickly.
That's a testament to your work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Insert hair flick here. No, but I think something that I asked her the other day, I think it was on Monday, we actually had this conversation. It's Thursdays we're recording. And I said to her, what's something that you resonate with from my social media? She goes, honestly, it's when you just talk about the real things.
Real shit.
And even with my clients, I'm always honest. If I'm having a bad day, if I'm running behind in work, if I'm running late to something, I'm honest. I don't need to be this perfect projection of what a coach, of what a business owner should be, because that's not me.
100%.
Reality is, at the end of the day, I get sick, I run late, I get anxious, I can't operate and I can't serve people to my best of my ability when I'm working and coaching from that state.
100%.
And I think the way I have able to have these long retentions with my clients is the vulnerability.
Yeah.
Just being a human.
Yeah.
And I think people react, buy, trust, know humans. They don't trust and know perfection because no one is perfection.
Well, no one expects you to be perfect. They expect you to be real, right? But how long did it take us probably in our business journey to learn that? I know for me, there was this mentality of, and I know on the day I spoke about the female archetypes, and the really common ones were like the perfectionist, the perfectionist, the overachiever,
The caregiver.
all
These
those
are really
sort of ones.
interesting. I still don't know which archetype I identify as.
And sometimes it's many, right? Or it might be a past version of yourself. But yeah, it's so interesting when you start to just trust yourself to kind of share a little bit more vulnerably. And you're right, people do business with people. They want to connect. They don't want to do business with this ideal robot.
If they wanted it, AI would be their coach.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
True that, honestly. But no, I think, breaking down, like you said, the de-influencing era, the era of mental health being accepted and people even being able to get in corporate jobs mental health days. I know a lot of my clients will come to me being like, I'm so anxious, I can't I'm having panic attacks or something, like take a day off work.
Yeah.
And I know that's not me to diagnose them, but it's me to encourage them, be like, you need a break. You need a day for yourself. You need a day to just rot, process, and then realign and get back into things. And I think it's such a really nice place, because I feel like 30 years ago, when our parents were my age, I mean, my parents weren't my age 30 years ago. That was more like 40 years ago. That wasn't a thing.
Well, no, it was this mentality which a lot of women still have around, we just got to push through, you got to get it done, you got to keep showing up. Like that was me for so long, and that's why I crashed and burned. And that's how it's a one-way ticket to burnout city, right?
And I think as well for women, your expectation is, obviously we're genetically made to be mothers and to carry children. And I think the expectation is you deal with it.
Yes.
You have to essentially mother human beings. So you go under the blanket. And I think it's such an interesting concept. Obviously, we're going on a massive tangent here. It could open a whole other can of worms. But it's like your genetic expectation is to birth someone, to care for someone, and to bring up someone in this world. And it's like, well, obviously, if that's what we're meant to do, we're obviously going to put ourselves second and put everyone else first. And we're coming into this time where it's like, no, we need to come first. We need to care for ourselves. We need to be able to fill our cup up first properly, not just with the face mask, not just with the sauna, not just with the fake tan. Properly fill up our cup first, care for ourselves through nutrition, movement, health, mindset, all of these things, and then be able to care and run and operate for other people, which I think is a massive switch that's happened from when my mum had her first child to now when my sister's had her first child. I think it's a really interesting comparison, like you mentioned, that has only recently started to happen.
100%. And thank God for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a big one. I find a lot of people as well, like there's that those patterns of self-neglect. And I talk about that a lot with my clients. And there's so many different cups that we need to fill, and we can't be pouring from an empty cup, but so many people try to do that.
And something I actually would like to talk to you about, we didn't even pre-plan this conversation that I'm about to ask you. But like I mentioned, filling up your cup, not being the saunas, the fake tans, the getting your hair done, the doing these things. Yes, those things make you feel good. But what would you put down as things that genuinely fill up a cup? Because I think it's becoming really glamorized and really much a trend, especially as much as I'm saying I love that social media is being spoken about, mental health is being spoken about on social media, it is becoming somewhat of a trend. Like I notice binge eating goes through trends, and I'm just like, what the fuck? It's not a cool thing.
It becomes a buzzword, and that's what I was going to say before. I actually lost my train of thought before. The thing that I always say is like, I don't really fuck with the words. Like I don't resonate with self-care, because self-care feels optional. It's
self-care feels like I need to go get ready for a party that I've got on the weekend.
Yeah, like self-care is very broad, but I find that people put self-care at the bottom of their list. So I always say to my clients, I want you to swap out self-care for self-devotion and ask yourself, how devoted am I to myself? Because the moments that you want to slip into those patterns of self-neglect, whether it's making excuses, saying yes when you want to say no, we've got 1,000 ways that we can self-neglect. And often this is quite learned behavior. Asking yourself, how devoted am I to myself? So, and it is about really, and this goes into a whole other thing of building self-trust, right? It's showing up for ourselves, whether it's raining, whether we've got our period, whether we're not in the mood, because we're dedicated to ourselves. We're practicing to be the version we want to be. So for me, to answer your question, when it comes to self-care, let's kind of like get rid of this idea of what it needs to look like and all of the shit like face masks and bubble baths and stuff. Sometimes it's actually just feeling your shit. Sometimes it is rotting because we're actually just processing. Sometimes it is just being like, I just need a month off any social events because I need to process my stuff. And that's the biggest thing I see, right? We think that it's just that, 3-week holiday once a year that's going to do it for us. Think about the compound effect though. Like we need to be able to make our self-devotion practices a priority every day. So it's not getting to the point where we're expecting a 2-week holiday to fix everything. Because what usually happens, I had a client who came back from a holiday and she's like, I feel more fucked than when
you're never relaxed from a holiday.
But because she actually had time to slow down, and she's like, everything came up all at once. And it happens, right? It happened to me in Japan. I thought I had processed my 2024. It was a really hard year and it needed to happen. It was still a great trip. But I remember because I finally slowed down my pace, everything started to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was space.
Yeah. It's just, it's something that I see now and I'm like, oh, self-care day, like these reels on TikTok and stuff. And it's like I definitely made a post about it. Like, I haven't posted it yet. I made it today about like curing the uglies and doing more those like physical things that you can do to make yourself feel better and look better. Because I am a believer that if you look and feel good, you will then act like a person that you want to be.
Totally.
But I definitely think there's this movement where filling your cup up has become so blurred and such a trendy conversation to have. You're like, what does it actually mean? Like, I genuinely, personally for me, I know exactly what that means, but then how would I then relay that to a client to be like, hey, like you need to take a break.
Yeah.
You need to go and do something for yourself. But when I say do something for yourself, I don't mean go and clean your house or go and do this or go and do that. I mean, do something genuinely for yourself that makes you feel good, whether that's staying in bed and watching a whole series or something like.
Well, it's not having those patterns of distracting yourself. But I mean, yeah, for me, the biggest thing is working out your capacity and starting to understand your capacity. Your capacity is going to change. Your capacity is going to be different. I always say, like, treat your energy like currency. Your currency is going to change. Some days you've got more to give and more to spare and you can be generous. Other days you need to save all of that for yourself. So if you just do check-ins with yourself every day, or even just being in tune with your cycle, parts of your cycle, your body is calling you to just slow the fuck down and rest, right? So if we can check in and be like, where am I at? How am I feeling? And get curious about how you feel. I think a lot of people judge it instantly. There's shame. Oh, I'm feeling really sad and it's been like that for a couple of days. What's wrong with me? Instantly. It's like, okay, how can we start to neutralize and normalize it? I'm noticing that I'm feeling sadness. Sadness is present and that's okay. What could this be? What can I do to nurture myself, as opposed to like, oh my God, what can I do to distract myself from feeling it?
And I think as well, there's power in actually taking the time to work out what that trigger was.
100%.
Whether you know it instantly or you actually have to really work it out, or if you saw something or something subconsciously triggered you that's then reflecting. I think there's really big power in regaining that power from actually working out what that trigger was. And I think it's, like you said, removing the shame. It's not a bad thing.
And I shared some questions on the day of the event, and it was, what is the trigger? What is the feeling associated? And what am I doing with it? And usually it's, how do I run from it? So if we're noticing a trigger, maybe it's I'm consuming some content online and it's making me question my own beauty or my own success. That's a trigger. Seeing someone's post, for instance, as an example. The feeling associated is I start to feel sick in my stomach. I start to get really red in the face. I don't know, whatever it is, but tune into your body and notice. It could be I instantly just want to go hide. And then what do we do about it? What's the reaction? Okay, I then doom scroll. So it's like, okay, instead of, and we need to understand our triggers and patterns because we can then kind of stop it in its tracks. And this is where the calms method comes in. Instead of repeating those cycles of self-neglect by being like, I'm going to now just go and eat a whole bunch of shit, or I'm going to go and, bitch to a friend about it, instead of just sitting with myself, getting curious and self-regulating. And that's like pretty much in a nutshell the work that I do. How can we learn to sit with ourselves instead of avoid ourselves, instead of shaming ourselves, instead of judging ourselves? But this is something we learn a lot later in life. And, which is why it's so cool to know that we're kind of in a generation now where it is more spoken about, because I think about our kids' generation, and I'd like to think that, I know for me a big thing is I want to teach them emotional regulation. Get curious about your emotions, not just sweep things under the carpet or feel shame in talking about your mental health.
This definitely leads me into my next question. Absolutely perfectly. So something I think that we are both very excited for and wanting is to become mums. And I think that's something that I'm very open about talking about. I mean, I definitely get asked probably weekly if I'm pregnant or when I'm trying to have a baby.
Yeah.
But
WOG family things.
Oh God. I get it all the time, especially now that we're going into 2 years being married. I'm like, let's just relax. It's not happening right now.
Yeah.
But something I personally would probably be the number one reason that I delay having a family is purely I don't want to give my baggage to my children.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, like, obviously breaking that generational cycle of my mental health goes on to, or not putting my mum under a bus or anything, but my mum's mental health then comes on to my sisters, then comes on to me because I'm the youngest of three, then comes on to my children, then goes on to my grandchildren. What would be the thing right now that I could start doing or could implement or could become aware of that would then break the cycle and then continue onwards positively for the future generations?
For sure. I love that question. So pretty much 100% of the women that I work with are cycle breakers, whether they realize it or not. The reason being they are getting curious about their own habits, their own patterns, their mental health, their emotional health. If we think of previous generations, this wasn't spoken about. It was just autopilot. It was whatever. And the thing is, like, it's not about shaming our, you know, previous generations, even like with inner child work and stuff. Like, it's not about shaming our parents because they just did the best that they could. But it's about thinking, okay, well, with the awareness that I have now, with the certain things that aren't working for me, certain beliefs I have about myself and my self-worth, lack of boundaries, people pleasing, whatever it is that's not working for us, the moment that you start to get curious and think, surely there's a different way, you are a cycle breaker in that way. So it's starting to just think, you know, what are the things? And again, it comes back to our capacity as well. I think the biggest thing with being a cycle breaker is learning to unlearn a whole bunch of shit, which is really hard.
That's the hardest part.
All that ingrained stuff. And it's so interesting because when we map out what those like real ingrained beliefs are, usually we know logically that like we don't resonate with it, but it's still so ingrained. Like it could be the order at which, you know, for me, the biggest thing has been I'm engaged. I can't be fucked with a wedding and getting married. I probably just am going to have kids first, right?
Yeah.
Now, this took me a long time to process because there was this thing of, yeah, but I've been told that it goes this way, right? This is a whole other tangent. Yeah. You get
me
it.
Pointing to myself.
Yeah.
I'm like, we made the joke that I was pregnant to our grandparents. A joke. Like we were joking.
It would have had a heart attack.
When I say I have never been yelled at by my husband's granddad before, and he openly says that I'm his favorite, I'm his number one, it burns my husband every single time. But I have never been yelled at by this man besides that day when we joked that I was pregnant, but we were only engaged. Yeah. Obviously, if we actually were, I'm sure he would have been over the moon. Yeah. But I'm just like, wow. And then it really reaffirmed for me, like, okay, there's a process. There's something that is expected of us to follow prior to what we want. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why it's so hard when we do get to a stage where we're kind of like, hold on, this path that I'm on no longer feels good for me. It doesn't feel aligned. And that can be the scariest thing because that's usually the path that we've been told, hell yeah, that's great, amazing. Like I'm proud of you. Or it could be the path where you're just like, this is who I've been told I should be. The moment you start to question that, like, that's almost like a spiritual awakening within itself. But coming back to being a cycle breaker, for me, it's really, and a lot of people who I speak to and I'm like, you were the cycle breaker in your family. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you wouldn't be sitting here having these conversations about different ways of being, different paths, other ways of thinking if you weren't. So yeah, I mean, if it comes to the question was how to start doing that, start to think about what's not working, what you don't want to pass on to the next generation, and start to educate yourself around how to actually become your own safe space and your own best friend, and how to regulate your nervous system, and how to set boundaries, and how to push back, all of those things that you're going to be able to teach the next generation, or you're going to model that to the next generation, which again, one of my favorite quotes, I saw it the other day and I was like, this is amazing. They say like, we're in therapy for the people who never went to therapy or something like that. It's that thing of like, you know, and again, we're not throwing shade, but it's kind of just being like, either way, when we're mothers, we're going to fuck up our kids in some way or another.
There's going to be something we do they're going to hate us for. They're going to rebel. And I'm like, oh,
that's
gosh.
it. Like, that's how it is. However, like, how cool to know that we're able to normalize things so much more that weren't normalized for us. Or if we think about things like, you know, for women, body image, like thinking of all the conversations and things
diet
that we
culture,
needed back then.
Things,
And I always say to my clients, like, when you think about your adult figure, you know, knowing what you know now, what did you need more of, and how can you start to be that person for yourself today? Is it more safety, more love, more reassurance? Is it more patience? Whatever it is, start to think, okay, well, how can I start to embody that? And that's you breaking the cycle.
Yeah, wow. My head is like twinkling. Like my brain feels like butterflies right now. Like
Tickling
I
your brain,
love
Mert.
this. I love this so much. And I think as well, like you said, like it's getting through and understanding the things that you don't resonate with and working to change them. But I also think a really big power is having conversations and normalizing conversations. I know you and I are very lucky to have some really close friends who we can have big, tough, hard conversations with. After your event we had on International Women's Day, we sat at a table, there were 4 of us, and we had some really deep conversations for, I think we were there for like 2.5 hours.
How lucky are we?
That like you would not expect to be having at a brunch. And it was just such a beautiful like flow of all of these conversations. And I think if you're someone who potentially doesn't have that, go to community things, go to events, go to spaces where you can have these conversations, where these conversations are welcomed and encouraged and accepted, because that could be such a beautiful starting point to then realize that you are not the only person who wants to break a cycle. You are not the only person who wants better for the future generations, whether you're a mum who's currently a new mum, you're a mum that's got a coach in either of our capacities, fitness, mental health, mindset, all of these things, or you're a girl who's like us with a partner who one day wants to become a mum or wants to start a family in whatever way, shape or form that is, but you want better. And I think it literally just starts with a simple conversation or finding someone to have that conversation with. And I think that it's such an underrated step.
Oh, your community and your environment is everything. And like, I think the 2 things that a lot of people struggle with when they are a cycle breaker or they're going through these really uncomfortable changes is working out authenticity and self-expression, the 2 things that often are kind of like watered down as we grow up and we are fitting into certain molds of who we think we should be. So, you know, for me, it's like, coming back home to yourself and being like, who was I? If we think of our soul and our essence, I'm a woo-woo girl, but like when we think about that, but realistically, you know, we can paint it as woo-woo or not. Like at the end of the day, when we think about who we were, what we enjoyed, how we liked to express ourselves before we were told this is what we needed, like our needs were quite basic. Like when we think about us as kids, we want love, safety, validation, recognition, and connection. If we can start to come back home to those things and prioritize those things, starting with your community, which is a huge one, a lot of people are outgrowing their friendship groups because they're like, I just can't connect in the same way, or I feel like we're just bitching, or it's low energy sort of stuff. We'll start to get around those things. You know, we've got community events, shameless plugs. I've got a membership. I've got, you know.
Shameless plugs. We're doing a boxing event on April 13th. Shameless plugs, free.
That's it.
It's free.
For sure. But like, get around it.
I think it's such a really beautiful thing that I want to say we're both really, really working this year hard to push out there, is that there are these spaces that are available to women, whether it's a paid community or not, that are there to be that starting point for someone. You are never alone. And I say this to my clients all the time. Yes, your journey is up to you and is dependent on your actions, but you don't need to be alone in the process. My journey to stage is up to me. I do not need to be alone in the process. I have friends. I have my coach. I have my husband. I have my community behind me that I can lean on. And I think it just makes everything so much more enjoyable and allows me to be more present and celebrated and validated and accepted and feel safe and all of these things that you've mentioned purely from just starting a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just keep it simple and start with that. Like just trust the vibe when you're around someone and you feel seen and safe and supported, which is exactly the spaces that we want to create. That's a big reason for my why. You know, there's magic in that. It doesn't have to be anything complex. It's just make sure you can hold that space and also be in those spaces as well, which is why therapy is so important too. Everyone should be in therapy, I think. Just having that space to unpack, to understand yourself, and to also have your limiting beliefs challenged as well is huge.
That's something that I definitely get from my husband all the time. He loves to push my buttons. Bless his soul, that man. Okay, so final question. We've been yapping for an hour. Final question. If you could give every single woman, big question, loaded question, one piece of advice to be either a cycle breaker, to implement something new in her life, in her routine, to become a better, more whole, safe, understood version of herself, what do you think that would be? Loaded question. I told you,
know.
loaded question.
Remember the Q&As and you'd ask a question, I'm like, okay, I've got about 3 answers for this.
You can give 3.
So for me, the biggest thing is like, don't overcomplicate it. At the end of the day, it is about learning to become your own safe space and to be your own biggest supporter. If you can have those as your goals, everything else falls into place. So if we start to think, okay, how am I not my biggest supporter at the moment? Work backwards from that. How am I not feeling like my own safe space? Work backwards from that. This is so hard to answer in just one question. I'm like, how do I not then talk for another hour?
I know.
Right? What was the question again?
What would be one piece of advice that you would give to a woman if she wanted to become that cycle breaker, to become a bit more understanding of herself, to become more present with herself? What do you think that would be?
Well, one of the questions that I shared at the community day, and I say this to all of my clients, is starting to ask yourself every day, who am I practicing to become? And I feel like we bring accountability into that, because we don't want to just go with emotions and have this idea of who we want to become, but then just be like, we'll just wait for it, wish, wait, and hope. It's about also having that mentality of like, well, I need to also make it happen and show up for myself. So if you can anchor into the concept of who am I practicing to become, if you wake up and you're noticing that you're playing into your excuses, use that version of yourself as like a point of reference. Well, what would she do? She'd probably just get the fuck up and nurture herself with nice food, or go on that walk, or have that difficult conversation, or set that boundary. So yeah, trust yourself to kind of be your own guide with that by thinking, okay, who is her? Who's that version that I'm creating of myself? How can I start to embody her every day?
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And sometimes just it's a hard lesson to learn.
It is.
And it's uncomfortable. And we're not saying that it is going to be easy. It's going to be fun the whole time. It's going to suck at some points. I'm guaranteeing that.
Which needs to be normalized. Like when it comes to healing, it's not like fucking face masks and rainbows. Like it can be really ugly a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think, like we said, it's just about a conversation, about normalizing it, and just about learning that all it is, all of this, what we're trying to create is becoming a better, more whole, understood version of yourself and being your own safe space. And I think it's a long journey. It takes people a long while to get there. I mean, I started my journey with all of this, 4 years ago now, and I think it's something that I'm going to be dealing with for another 40 years, and I think it's just a really nice evolution that I can take and learn and flow with and be a part of and just understand and share, and it's a process.
But also reminding yourself that there's no deadline. Like I find that's a really big thing people grapple with. They'll like come into sessions and be like, I thought I already dealt with this. Like I thought it's like, yeah, but like
it can come back.
We go through different seasons and every new level is a new devil, and things come up and we get re-triggered. But I think if you can start to just approach yourself not as a project with a deadline, but just like an ever-evolving thing, like we're meant to change, how exciting that we change, how boring if we were the same. I think that kind of takes the shame out of it as well.
Well, I could keep talking to you for another hour very easily, but I think we should wrap that up there. Let me know if you want me to bring Lauren on, or if you want to, we can maybe do like a Q&A session. I feel like that would be really beneficial. So
I can yap more.
We can yap. We clearly yap for over an hour now, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hopefully someone that you know personally, if it's yourself or someone that's very close to you, will benefit from this episode. Make sure you share it around, rate the podcast 5 stars. And with that, we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Bye.